Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 13 of season 5 of The Walking Dead called Forget. And generally speaking, this is sort of a low-key episode. They keep things on a real character level. And this is really all about just sort of focusing in on the new situation in the Alexandria safe zone and seeing how everybody is adjusting. And of course, the major plot of making sure that there's going to be some action for the finale does inch forward a bit. So let's just kind of get right into things and talk about what's going on with folks. Now, let's start with Sasha, since she kind of opens things up with her taking those family portraits and then going out in the woods and using them as target practice. Not really surprising that the images of happy families are probably not the sort of thing she wants to be looking at right now. And, in addition to the loss of Tyrese being so recent and raw for her, you have to think that maybe she's looking at those pictures and thinking, man, these people are all probably either dead, walkers, or have become horrible murderers or something like that out there in the wilds. And then, of course, there's that whole scene of her at the party where she freaks out, particularly after that lady offers to make her a leg of something. Um, a very unfortunate reminder of poor Bob, no doubt. And this just, of course, leads to her freaking out in front of everybody. And, I really did like the way they portrayed that whole scene leading up to her freaking out. Because I'm one of those people, I don't like parties. I go to them and it's fun for a while, but after a while I just start feeling really overwhelmed. And while I've never experienced anything quite as bad as what Sasha's going through here, that is a little bit of what the feeling is like for me. I'm very much an introvert. I kind of get my energy I recharge my energy in life by being alone. Going out and being around people at parties, that's fun and all, but there's a limit, and once the tank is empty, it's like, okay, I'm out of here. But there is kind of more to it than that. And we see it not just with Sasha, but with everybody else in Alexandria. And in a way, it's kind of like reverse culture shock. And of course, you've probably heard about culture shock, where people go to another country and they just have a hard time adjusting and dealing with the way things work there. Reverse culture shock is when you come back to your home country and you just feel so weird and alienated and out of sync with things because you've gotten used to the way things work somewhere else. So, with Rick and the gang out there in the wilds, so to speak, coming back to quote unquote civilization, that's reverse culture shock for them. They just don't know how to deal with people having small talk at parties and drinking alcohol just for the hell of it. Well, okay, they did do a little bit of that, but just casually drinking alcohol and not having to worry that it might dull your senses enough to get you killed? That's definitely a new one for them for quite a while. But anyway, I also did like, though, that Tasha did bring up the idea of, hey, there should be somebody in that lookout tower. Now, it really does seem odd that Deanna and everybody else in the community would put such a low priority on something like that. I mean, they've had people running around out there for quite a while, so they have to be aware of herds. The recruiters have to have reported back to them that there are some less than savory people out there. And then there's the old idea of, well, what if somebody comes back and they've got trouble hot on their heels? You're going to want somebody down there who can signal hey, be ready to open the gate and be ready to close it super quick. We've got an emergency. So again, it really seems very strange that they would not have somebody up there all the time. That just seems like a real common sense thing to do. And this does hint that apparently some of the stuff that happened with Andrea in the comics is going to be moved on over to Sasha, which is fine. She's a good fit for that, especially since they're going to be doing some other stuff with Maggie, what with her apparently becoming Deanna's secretary and all. Yeah, okay, so nothing really particular to say about Sasha. Joan sort of adjusting in pretty well. I definitely did like that scene with Rosita and Abraham, as well as the scene with Abraham and Michonne. I especially love that part where, Abraham's looking very uncomfortable at the party, and then Rosita's like, they have beer, and he's like, I guess I could hang around for a little while. That was cute. Of course, the real crux of it all is what's going on with Carol, Daryl, and Rick. Them meeting out in the creepy house and talking about like, okay, if things go south, how are we going to take over this place? And it's a very interesting situation to be watching because we really do have no reason to believe that the Alexandria people are bad. And in a way, it's almost as if Rick and Carol are the villains here. They're sort of basically planning to instigate a revolution or a coup or whatever you want to call it against people who they have no reason to distrust. I mean, they have experience, but this particular group of people have been nothing but good and welcoming to them. So really, the real threat is here is their own paranoia, their own lack of humanity, really. I'm reminded of something that one of my coworkers was talking about. Like, this is someone who'd been in the military and has flat out said to me, like, I have blood on my hands from that time, and has worked with troubled young people, and they just kind of said, I'm kind of at this point where I like people, but I don't really have much faith in humanity. I've seen too much. And Carol and Rick really do seem like that's kind of the situation they are in now, struggling to believe that there's good in people that they don't know. Now, granted, they still have perfectly good, they don't know these people well, and they have every reason in the world to be cautious. But, well, basically, it's somebody put it really well to me one time, is that cynical people say no, and optimistic people say yes. Like, Rick and Carol have good reason to be cynics. But by saying no to the possibility, the real possibility that these could be good people, it's like they're closing off a real opportunity. Now, again, they haven't completely written off Alexandria. They're just being very cautious, but they're really on the edge of all of that. But it is definitely fun to sort of look at the idea of Rick and Carol as possibly being villains here. I mean, we've seen Rick teetering on the edge before, and we've seen Carol kill innocent people. So yeah, it's not hard to buy into at all. And then there's Daryl in this whole situation, where it doesn't really seem like he fully buys into all of this. It's more like he's just kind of going along with what Carol and Rick are saying because he's very close to them, and he knows he sure as hell doesn't fit in here. So he might as well stick with what he knows, which is fighting. But this kind of leads to that whole interesting subplot between Daryl and Aaron. Two guys about as different as you could possibly be. But this episode, we get to see them spending some time together, bonding a little bit, and we're seeing that these guys actually get along okay. The whole thing with them trying to save the horse. Again, offering us a reminder that zombies are more than capable of taking down a large animal in sufficient numbers. And the whole thing with him, Daryl, Eric, and Aaron just having dinner, and Daryl engaging in a tiny bit of normalcy. And then there's the whole thing of, hey, why don't you build a motorcycle, and why don't you become, the other recruiter for our community? Which, if you have to think about it, really is a great fit for Daryl. He's one of those people that, was it? I think it was Charlie over on Emergency Austin could have described Daryl as an outdoor cat trying to learn how to be an indoor cat. And that's a really good fit for Daryl. Daryl needs the community. He needs to be around those people to kind of keep himself anchored in being human. But Daryl's also kind of his own guy, and he's a guy who really thrives out there in the wilds. So he does sort of need to be able to come and go as needed. Honestly, the only whole real thing about that whole situation there is actually Aaron. And this is kind of like the one real black mark I've seen against him as a character so far. And he's like, I don't want Eric going out there and being a recruiter anymore. You should have that job. Well, screw you, Aaron. Isn't that Eric's decision? I mean, I know he's your boyfriend and all, but you don't really get to make that decision. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's up to Deanna. And dude, have you talked with him about this? How does Eric feel about this? Come on, Aaron. You should be better than this. Let's see. Yeah, nothing really particular to say about anybody except for Carol and Rick. So let's kind of move on to them. So Carol is playing up the "oh, I'm just a harmless housewife and den mother" type to the hilt, and hers like coming up with that plan to get their hands on some guns just in case. Well, that's cool and all, but then there's the whole execution of the thing where Carol goes in there and this kid, I think his name was Sam, Jesse's son, catches her. Now, okay, let's stop and think for a minute. This is Carol who spent all this time out there in the wilderness. She's survived out there by her own for a while, and has no small amount of experience at being sneaky when she needs to be in order to survive. And yet, when she goes into the storage room, what does she do? She flips on the freaking lights so that anybody in the area can see, hey, there's somebody in there. And then, worst of all, a kid sneaks up on her. A kid who would have had to climb in the same window that she did in order to get in there. And she doesn't notice this. Alright, unless this kid is a damn ninja, this makes no sense whatsoever. And this is the second time that basically one of our really competent heroes has been, either taken out or basically been made a chump by somebody who really they should never have happened. There's no way in hell Tyree should have just spaced out in that house when he almost certainly knew there was at least a zombie around. And yeah, I mean, this is just dumb. Now, granted, it's there so that we get that really awesome scene with Carol threatening Sam, and that's creepy as all hell. I mean, that Carol is hardcore, but it's just like, oh my God, Carol, I am like, all right, you are officially one of the most terrifying people who has ever been on this show. I mean, that's acting, people. That is acting. But yeah, of course, again, this sort of feeds into the whole idea of Rick and Carol kind of being villains here, with Carol terrorizing a child. I mean, not cool, Carol. Not cool at all. And then there's this whole situation with Rick. Alright, Rick is obviously more than a little bit attracted to Jesse. They're flirting. There's even, he even plants one on her. And, when her husband's around, his hand even drifts briefly to his gun. I mean, holy shit, Rick is turning into Shane. I mean, can you believe this? And yet it's not outside his realm of characterization. Rick's coming back down to humanity a little bit, but it's not a smooth landing. Yes, he's obviously attracted to this woman, but on the other hand, the lady's taken, and Rick does not care for that. I mean, yeah, her husband was slightly rude to him, but seriously, dude, you're drifting into Shane territory there, man. Somebody needs to have a serious talk with Rick. And I also really like that bit where Sam sort of stamps Rick's hand with the A, and it's obviously intended to stand for Alexandria. But of course, you can just see this real twitch from Rick, and it's a nice subtle thing that Andrew Lincoln does. And you can see that he's just in his expression he's thinking back to Boxcar A at Terminus. And then there's that whole scene where Rick wanders around, and then he hears the walker on the other side of the wall. And he kind of puts his hand there, and you can still see the A on it. And then it just kind of shows the two of them like both leaning against the wall. And you really got to wonder what's going on in Rick's mind there. And to me, that said to me that Rick kind of was like, man, I understand this walker and I have more in common than the people around me. We understand each other. He understands that he wants to eat me, and I understand that I want to kill him before he can eat me. It's a very simple, very cut and dry relationship. But now, back among civilized people, for lack of a better term, Rick finds himself lost. And then there on the other side of the wall, there's the world he understands. And maybe the world that he thinks he belongs in. And, oh yeah, and then there's of course the whole situation with the walker with the W carved into it. Well, We've already had the word wolves mentioned to us, so I think it's pretty clear where this is going. I'm guessing that the wolves are sort of a rebranding of the scavengers from the comics, and well, if you know the comics, you know the words little pig, let me in." Very fitting that in that case, then, that they would be renamed as the wolves. So I don't think we're going to get a huge amount of characterization on the wolves when they do eventually come a knocking at the door, but I'm sure some time will be taken to show just how evil they really are. I mean, we've basically been promised as much from the show's producers. And yeah, guys, that's all I have for you this time. As always, please comment, rate, subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.